Chosen one, this message is not random, and you already know that deep down. Something inside you stirred the moment you saw these words, because your spirit recognizes truth faster than your mind can explain it. For the last 3 months, your life felt strange, heavy, confusing, and at times unfair. Things didn't collapse loudly, they shifted quietly. People changed without warning. Doors you thought were solid suddenly felt fragile. Situations you trusted started revealing cracks. And all the while, you kept asking yourself the same question late at night when no one could hear you think, why is this happening when I'm trying to do the right thing? What you didn't realize then is what you're being told now. God was testing you in disguise, and every single test was tailored specifically for you. These were not obvious tests. They didn't come with labels or warnings. They came disguised as delays, as silence, as misunderstandings, as missed opportunities, as people walking away without explanation. They came as moments where you had every reason to react, but something in you chose restraint. Moments where you could have given up, but you kept going anyway. Moments where you were tempted to lower your standards, but you didn't. That wasn't luck, that wasn't coincidence, that was character being revealed under pressure. For 3 months, God watched how you responded when no one was clapping for you. He watched how you spoke when you were misunderstood. He watched how you treated people who couldn't benefit you anymore. He watched whether you stayed honest when dishonesty would have been easier. He watched whether you stayed faithful when quitting would have made more sense. And here's the part most people miss. The test wasn't about perfection. It was about consistency. It was about who you are when you're tired, disappointed, and unsure if anything you're doing even matters. There were days you felt unseen. Days you wondered if your prayers were hitting the ceiling and falling back down. Days when you did everything right and still didn't get the results you hoped for. That wasn't punishment, that was training. God was testing your endurance, not your worth. He was stretching your patience, not denying your promise. And every time you chose faith over frustration, humility over ego, integrity over shortcuts, you passed another test without even knowing you were being graded. Some of the tests came through people who smiled at you but didn't support you, people who benefited from your kindness but disappeared when you needed understanding, people who doubted you, questioned you, or subtly tried to pull you off your path. God was watching to see if you would become bitter or better. He was watching to see if you would let disappointment harden your heart or sharpen your discernment. And instead of turning cold, you grew wiser. Instead of lashing out, you learned when to stay silent. Instead of chasing validation, you learned to stand firm in who you are. Other tests came through isolation. You felt alone even when surrounded by others. Conversations felt shallow. Connections felt temporary. You outgrew spaces without fully understanding why. That loneliness wasn't abandonment, it was separation. God was removing noise so he could see if you would listen. He was stripping distractions so you could recognize his voice. And even in moments when you felt disconnected, you didn't lose your values. You didn't lose your compassion. You didn't lose your faith. That mattered more than you know. There were financial tests too, moments when resources felt tight, moments when you had to choose wisdom over impulse, moments when generosity cost you something real. God watched how you handled what you had, not what you wished you had. He watched whether you panicked or planned, whether you complained or trusted, whether you acted out of fear or faith. And even when it was uncomfortable, you didn't abandon your principles. You learned discipline. You learned restraint. You learned gratitude in seasons where many people only complain. The emotional tests were some of the hardest. Old wounds resurfaced, memories you thought were healed tried to speak again. Doubts whispered when you were exhausted. The enemy tried to convince you that you were falling behind, that others were winning while you were waiting. But instead of letting those thoughts define you, you questioned them, you prayed through them, you kept showing up, you kept doing the inner work. That's strength most people never develop because they quit before it forms. Here's something powerful you need to understand right now. God doesn't test people he plans to abandon. He tests people he plans to elevate. These last 3 months were not about breaking you, they were about qualifying you. You were being prepared for a level of influence, responsibility, and blessing that requires depth, not just desire. Anyone can want more. Very few can be trusted with more. And trust is built in hidden seasons, not public victories. You may not feel different on the outside, but something inside you is solid now. You don't react the way you used to. You don't chase what no longer aligns with you. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone. Your spirit has matured. Your discernment is sharper. Your patience is deeper. That is evidence of growth, even if your circumstances haven't fully caught up yet. God tested how you handle waiting because what's coming requires timing. He tested how you handle silence because what's coming requires wisdom. He tested how you handle disappointment, because what's coming requires emotional strength. He tested how you handle opposition, because what T's coming will attract attention, and the reason you're still standing, still believing, still hoping is because you passed every single test that mattered. Not everyone around you passed their part. Some people failed the test of loyalty. Some failed the test of honesty. Some failed the test of humility. That's why they're no longer walking with you. That's not your loss, that's alignment. God was filtering your environment while refining your character. He was removing what couldn't go where you're headed. You didn't know you were being tested when you chose kindness over retaliation. You didn't know you were being tested when you stayed disciplined while others were careless. You didn't know you were being tested when you kept praying even when nothing seemed to change. But heaven knew. Every quiet decision counted. Every unseen sacrifice was recorded. Every tear you wiped away in private mattered. Now understand this clearly. Passing the test doesn't always mean immediate reward. Sometimes it means transition. Sometimes it means clarity. Sometimes it means the weight lifts before the blessing arrives. You may already feel a shift happening, a sense that something heavy is ending, a sense that your perspective is changing, a sense that your spirit is lighter, even if your situation hasn't fully transformed yet. That's the signal. That's the evidence that the testing season is closing. What comes next will require the version of you that was forged in these last 3 months. The calm you learned will protect you. The discipline you developed will sustain you. The discernment you gained will guide you. And the faith you held on to when it didn't make sense will anchor you when things start moving fast. Don't rush this moment. Don't minimize what you've survived. Don't forget how far you've come internally. You didn't just endure a hard season. You emerged wiser, steadier, and more aligned than before. And while you may not see the full picture yet, know this: God never wastes a test. Every challenge you faced was shaping you for something specific, something intentional, something that requires exactly the strength you now carry. Stay grounded, stay humble, stay faithful. The same God who tested you quietly is the same God who knows when to reveal what he's been preparing. And even now, as you're listening to this, something is being confirmed in your spirit, something that tells you this wasn't just a difficult 3 months, this was a defining one. And the story isn't finished yet, because what you passed prepared you for what's about to unfold next. And the rhythm of this journey is shifting in ways you're only beginning to sense as the lessons settle deeper and the purpose behind every hidden test continues to unfold in your life. And as that unfolding continues, you may notice that your reactions to life are no longer driven by urgency or fear, but by a quiet confidence that didn't exist before. That confidence wasn't given to you overnight. It was built moment by moment, decision by decision, when you chose to stay grounded instead of spiraling, when you chose prayer instead of panic, when you chose growth instead of resentment. Those choices rewired something deep within you. They shifted how you see yourself and how you see the world. You're not as easily shaken now, not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. There were moments during those 3 months when you felt like you were standing still while everyone else was moving ahead. Social media showed smiles and progress, announcements and celebrations, while your life felt paused. That pause wasn't stagnation, it was incubation. God was doing work beneath the surface, the kind of work that doesn't show immediately but determines everything later. Seeds grow in darkness before they ever break the soil. And you were planted, not buried. You were positioned where roots could form without distraction. You were tested in how you handled comparison. You were tested in how you handled envy knocking at your door, trying to convince you that you were behind, forgotten, overlooked. But instead of letting jealousy take control, you learned to bless others genuinely, even when your own prayers felt unanswered. That ability to celebrate someone else's progress without bitterness is rare, and it marked you as someone who can be trusted with more. There were tests in how you handled authority and correction, moments where you were misunderstood. D, where your intentions were questioned, where your efforts went unnoticed. You could have grown defensive, you could have shut down, you could have walked away angry. Instead, you listened, you reflected, you took what was useful and let the rest fall away. That level of emotional maturity doesn't come naturally. It's developed under pressure, and you passed that test quietly without applause. God also tested your obedience in small things, not grand gestures, not dramatic sacrifices, but subtle nudges, a moment to hold your tongue, a moment to walk away, a moment to forgive without receiving an apology. A moment to trust even when logic said otherwise. Those small acts of obedience carry weight in the spiritual realm. They reveal whether someone is led by impulse or by discernment, and time after time, you chose the harder right over the easier wrong. There were nights when your body was tired, but your mind wouldn't rest. Thoughts looped, questions surfaced. You wondered if you were missing something, if you made a wrong turn, if you waited too long or moved too slowly. Yet even in those restless hours, you didn't abandon your values. You didn't numb yourself with unhealthy escapes. You sat with the discomfort. You processed it. You prayed through it. That willingness to face discomfort instead of avoiding it is what builds resilience, and resilience is essential for what lies ahead. You were also tested in generosity when you felt you had little to give, not just financially, but emotionally. Being kind when you felt drained, being patient when you felt overwhelmed, being present when you wanted to withdraw. God watched whether you would let scarcity mentality take over or whether you would trust that giving doesn't deplete you when it's done from the right place. And every time you gave anyway, you proved that your heart wasn't controlled by fear. Some tests came through temptation, subtle ones, opportunities to compromise just a little, invitations to take shortcuts, moments where no one would have known if you bent the rules, but you knew. And God knew. Integrity isn't proven in public moments, it's revealed in private decisions. You chose to stay aligned even when misalignment looked rewarding in the short term. That decision protected your future in ways you don't fully see yet. There was also a test of identity. Life tried to define you by what wasn't working, by what was delayed, by what was unclear. Circumstances tried to tell you who you were, but instead of letting temporary situations become permanent labels, you held on to a deeper truth. You remembered who you are at your core. You refused to let a season rewrite your identity. That anchored you when everything else felt unstable. God tested whether you would keep your heart soft in a hard season. Hard seasons tend to harden people. They become cynical, closed off, reactive. You didn't. You stayed compassionate. You stayed empathetic. You stayed open. That softness is not weakness, it's strength under control. It means pain didn't make you cruel. Disappointment didn't make you cold. Waiting didn't make you bitter. That alone sets you apart. You may not realize it yet, but the way you handled these last 3 months changed how heaven responds to you. Not because God needed proof, but because alignment creates flow. When your character matches your calling, things can move without breaking you. And right now, you are more aligned than you've ever been. Even if your life still feels in between, there were tests in how you spoke about your situation. Complaining was easy. Criticizing was tempting. Speaking negativity would have felt justified. But you learned the power of restraint. You learned that words shape atmosphere. You learned that constantly speaking lack invites more lack. So you chose your words carefully. You spoke hope even when you felt uncertain. You spoke faith even when answers were delayed. That discipline over your speech shifted something unseen but significant. God also tested how you handled endings. Some things ended without closure. Some conversations never happened. Some relationships faded instead of finishing cleanly. That lack of closure was itself a test. Would you obsess, chase explanations, reopen wounds, or would you trust that not everything needs an answer to move forward? You chose peace over explanation. You chose growth over fixation. That freed you in ways you didn't immediately recognize. There were days when you felt like you were carrying more than others could see. Responsibilities, expectations, internal battles. You didn't always have someone to lean on. You became your own support system in many ways, leaning into God when human support felt unavailable. That solitude strengthened your spiritual muscles. It taught you how to stand alone without feeling lonely, how to rely on God without resentment toward others. You were tested in patience with yourself. You expected more from yourself. You wanted faster progress, clearer direction, stronger results. There were moments of self-criticism, moments where you questioned whether you were doing enough. But instead of letting that turn into self-sabotage, you learned self-compassion. You learned that growth is not linear. You learn to give yourself grace without lowering your standards. That balance is rare and it's necessary for long-term success. God tested whether you would stay teachable. Pride closes ears. Humility keeps them open. Even when you felt confident in your path, you remained willing to learn, to adjust, to receive insight. That teachable spirit kept you flexible, not rigid. And flexibility is what allows you to move when direction shifts. You may not have noticed it, but your discernment sharpened during this season. You see through things faster now. You sense misalignment sooner. You're less easily impressed by appearances. You value substance over noise. That discernment will protect you from distract. Ions that look good but lead nowhere. As the season shifts, you might feel a mix of relief and anticipation. Relief that the heaviness is lifting. Anticipation because you sense movement coming. That feeling is not imagination, it's transition. But transition doesn't mean rushing. It means staying grounded while things rearrange. It means trusting timing without forcing outcomes. You didn't pass these tests to prove you're perfect. You passed them because you're persistent. You didn't quit on your values when quitting would have been understandable. You didn't abandon your faith when doubt was loud. You didn't lose yourself when pressure increased. That's why this season mattered so much. What's ahead will require discernment and opportunities. Not every open door will be meant for you. Not every invitation will align with your purpose. The clarity you gained will help you choose wisely. You won't chase everything anymore. You'll recognize what's for you by how it resonates with your spirit, not how impressive it looks. There will be moments soon where you'll look back at these 3 months and finally understand why things unfolded the way they did. Connections that didn't work out will make sense. Delays that frustrated you will reveal their protection. Lessons that felt heavy will show their value. But even before full clarity arrives, you'll feel steadier walking forward because you trust the process now in a way you didn't before. You are not the same person who entered this testing season. Your foundation is stronger, your focus is clearer, your boundaries are healthier, your faith is deeper. And even as you continue moving forward, there will be moments where the memory of this season reminds you of what you're capable of enduring, of choosing right, of staying aligned when it's hard. And that memory will quietly guide your decisions as new chapters begin to open and new responsibilities come into view, carrying with them echoes of everything you learned, everything you refined, and everything you became during a season that tested you in disguise and reshaped you in ways that are still unfolding. And as those new chapters begin to breathe, you'll notice that your sense of urgency has softened into clarity. You're no longer scrambling for signs or begging for reassurance. You move differently now. You pause before responding. You listen before reacting. You observe before deciding. That calm didn't come from comfort. It came from surviving uncertainty without losing yourself. It came from learning that not every question needs an immediate answer, and not every problem needs your immediate reaction. You were tested in surrender more than you were tested in strength. Strength says, I can handle this. Surrender says, I trust you even when I don't understand this. And there were moments when surrender was the only option you had left, when logic ran out, when effort felt exhausted, when control slipped through your fingers. In those moments, you didn't collapse. You released, you let go without giving up. That is a rare kind of faith, one that doesn't demand explanations before it stays loyal. You also learned the difference between being productive and being purposeful. For a while, you were tempted to fill the silence with activity, to stay busy so you wouldn't have to feel the weight of waiting. But eventually you realized that movement without direction is just noise. God slowed you down so you could realign. He pulled you back so you could step forward with intention. And once you stopped resisting that slowdown, peace started to replace pressure. There were tests and boundaries too. Saying no when you used to say yes, stepping back when you used to overextend, protecting your energy instead of constantly explaining yourself. That wasn't selfishness, that was stewardship. God was teaching you how to guard what He's growing in you. Not everyone deserves access to your time, your thoughts, your vulnerability, and learning that didn't make you distant, it made you wise. Some of the hardest tests were internal. Nobody saw them. The conversations you had with yourself, the moments when your confidence dipped, the times you replayed situations, wondering if you should have done more or less or something different. But instead of letting those thoughts spiral endlessly, you learned to interrupt them. You learned to speak truth over yourself. You learned to recognize when a thought wasn't helping and didn't deserve your agreement. That mental discipline strengthened you more than you realize. God tested your faith without giving you timelines. That's one of the most uncomfortable places to live, believing without dates, trusting without deadlines, hoping without guarantees, yet you stayed. You didn't walk away because the promise didn't come with a schedule. You learned to value alignment over speed. And in doing so, you positioned yourself to receive what's meant for you without it destroying you. You were tested in humility when things didn't move as fast as you expected, when recognition didn't come, when credit wasn't given, when your effort felt invisible. And instead of demanding attention, you kept your head down and your heart right. You let God be your advocate instead of trying to force outcomes. That humility didn't diminish you. It protected you from becoming someone you wouldn't recognize later. There were also tests in hope. Hope when circumstances suggested caution. Hope when logic said prepare for disappointment. Hope when past experiences whispered don't expect too much. But you chose hope anyway. Not reckless hope, but grounded hope. The kind that says, even if I don't see it yet, I believe something is working beneath the surface. That hope kept your spirit alive when it could have gone numb. You may have noticed that your tolerance for chaos has decreased. Things that used to feel normal now feel draining. Drama exhausts you. Confusion irritates you. You crave clarity, peace, depth. That's not because you become rigid, it's because you've matured. Your spirit recognizes what disrupts your alignment, and it no longer negotiates with it. That discernment is a gift from this testing season. God also tested your willingness to be patient with others while being firm with yourself. You stopped expecting everyone to operate at your level of awareness. You stopped taking everything personally. You realize that people act from their level of healing, not your level of intention. That understanding gave you compassion without compromising your boundaries. You learned to love without overextending, to forgive without reconnecting prematurely. There were moments when you questioned whether all this inner work was worth it, whether anyone would ever see it, whether it would translate into something tangible. But growth doesn't ask for validation before it works. Character compounds quietly. And when the moment comes that requires what you've built, you won't have to scramble to become ready. You already will be. You were tested in trust, trusting God's timing, trusting your intuition, trusting that walking away wasn't failure, trusting that staying silent wasn't weakness, trusting that rest wasn't laziness. Each time you chose trust over control, something loosened inside you. Anxiety lost a bit of its grip. Peace found more room to settle. You might notice now that you don't explain yourself as much. You don't feel the need to convince people of your intentions. You've learned that those meant to understand you won't require endless clarification, and those determined to misunderstand you won't be persuaded anyway. That acceptance freed you from chasing approval and anchored you in authenticity. God tested whether you would stay grounded when emotions fluctuated. Some days you felt strong, other days you felt fragile. But instead of letting emotions dictate your identity, you learned to observe them without becoming them. You learned that feelings are information, not instruction. That emotional intelligence stabilized you during moments when everything else felt uncertain. There were also tests in forgiveness. Forgiving without reconciliation, forgiving without closure, forgiving without acknowledgement. That kind of forgiveness isn't about excusing behavior, it's about releasing yourself from carrying resentment. You chose freedom over bitterness, even when bitterness felt justified. That choice lightened your spirit more than you expected. You were tested in obedience when instructions didn't make sense, when the next step wasn't clear, when obedience meant waiting instead of acting, when obedience meant resting instead of striving. You learned that obedience isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet consistency. Sometimes it's choosing not to move until peace confirms the direction. As this season continues to shift, you may find yourself less attached to outcomes and more committed to alignment. You care less about forcing results and more about maintaining integrity. That shift will guide you safely through opportunities that would have overwhelmed the old version of you. You didn't pass these tests by being flawless. You passed them by being faithful. Faithful to your values, faithful to your growth, faithful to the voice inside you that kept whispering, stay steady. And even now, that voice is guiding you forward, reminding you that this journey isn't about rushing to the finish line, but about becoming the kind of person who can carry what's coming with wisdom, humility, and strength, allowing each step to unfold naturally, each lesson to integrate fully, and each new phase to meet you at the exact pace your spirit is ready to receive. As the path ahead continues to open in ways that feel quieter, deeper, and more intentional than anything you've known before, chosen one, let this settle deep within you now. The tests are no longer behind the curtain, and the weight you carried was never meant to crush you, only to confirm you. You didn't imagine the struggle, and you didn't misinterpret the silence. Every delay refined you, every loss redirected you, every unanswered prayer strengthened your discernment. You stand here changed, not because life became easier, but because your spirit became unshakable. What God tested in private, He will honor in due time, and what you endured without applause prepared for what cannot be taken from you. Walk forward without fear, without regret, without needing proof. You passed what most people fail quietly, and from this point on, your steps will carry a different authority, a deeper peace, and a confidence that doesn't need to announce itself, because the season that questioned you is ending, and the season that confirms you has already begun.